So what we're going to talk about now is self-direction in physics graduate education. And this is David's career-long commitment. So this is the introduction. We're going to talk about self-directed learning, which has been identified as necessary for completion of the graduate program. And David's method of self-directed learning is based on an application of symmetry to problem solving in physics. And it was developed to support self-directed learning in himself, his graduate students, and his associates. Now I'm going to talk about 5 different things as far as the background before we get into the analysis that I'm going to talk about. So the 5 different things are, I'm going to situate symmetry within science and nuclear physics. And then I'm going to talk about the qualities of self-directed learners, the importance of mentoring to self-directed learning, my role with David in supporting self-directed learning, and a description of narrative research, which is the methodology that I used to investigate his self-directed learning. Okay, so the aim of science is to organize and explain phenomena, and the result or falsifiable by independent observers. And this is accomplished through one of 2 things, either discoveries or inventions. Now, the interesting thing is that symmetry is both a discovery and an invention. And the most important concept is that all directions in space are equivalent, and there's no real distinction of absolute location in time and space. Nuclear physics recognizes processes in nuclei as dynamic regarding the energies of nuclear states, their spins and parities. And states of the nucleus in rotational and vibrational motion need to be generated. And this was recognized by David and George Rosenstiel, and based on the group of symplectic transformations. And you saw that Christina had these nice little drawings. Mine has become all foggy there, but if she can tell me who did these drawings, because one of the things I used to do for David was I did the drawing with John Wood, and these are an order of a magnitude increased in the ability to do things than when we were doing it many, many years ago. Okay, now let's look at the qualities of self-directed learners. This is the second point with respect to the background of this. So this was work that I did a number of years ago discussing what these qualities are, but let's look at them. They think on what they personally value rather. Now, because it's not based on a pre-designed curriculum, they're not interested in judging their standard. Instead, they determine when their learning has taken place and been achieved at a level of expertise that they themselves have hoped for. They can, and most often do, prefer to learn ages, and they're not tied to a schedule imposed by others in order to learn. So now let's look at the importance of mentoring to David regarding self-directed learning. So mentoring features equitable learning experience with social transformative value, unsurpassed in increasing graduate students' work satisfaction and fulfillment. Faculty mentorship is important for initiation into the intellectual community and sustainable scholarship. Peer mentorship affects 4 domains of graduate learning: academic, social, psychological, and career. Now, the foundations for David's own work as a self-directed learner and the foundation supported self-directed learning in his interactions with graduate students and with colleagues. Oh, and this is a picture from David's research program from the website, and you'll see Juliana and Joe and David and Stephen and Harul. Okay, now the next thing, the 4th thing regarding this background I'm talking about, this is how it was that David and I actually got together here. We first of all met in 1985 when David was the Associate Dean of Division 3, which was the physical sciences in the School of Graduate Studies, and I was elected from the Department of Education to be on the School of Graduate Studies Council. And I'm a philosopher of education, and David and I talked a lot about self-directed education. We were actually on a 3-person committee together. And during that time we were on the committee, we talked about it. And as a result of talking about it, he thought that he could gain additional insight into understanding self-directed learning with respect to graduate student mentorship and in enhancing his own research path in theoretical nuclear physics. In 1990, he got the Killam Research Fellowship, which was awarded to him to work on the book with John Wood. And it provided him with 5 part of what he used that money for was setting up a research assistantship for me. I got my PhD in '89. And the purpose of that was to, as I said, to enhance his self-direction in the work that he was doing. So up until 2020, when David died, the work that we did, it's going to be based on 35 years worth of discussions and talks that we had and work that David put forward. So there we have that information. And the very final thing is I want to talk to you about a little bit about my methodology that I use, which is called narrative research. And it's a qualitative method that is the text and conversations regarding self-directed learning, and it treats the data as stories, and it results from the communication exchange, and it relates human actions to social contexts in which they. Now, the self-directed learning supported by David is a teacher like me because it assumes self-directed learning is more than just an aim. Many people who work with graduate students, they aim for their students to become self-directed, but David didn't just aim. He thought that it should be a process, that self-direction should be something that the graduate student should be going through at all times. And that, because he saw it as a process, it was very accessible to me as a narrative researcher to know what it was that he was doing. So his process then, in using narrative research, I analyzed it to be based on 4: space, open-mindedness, and his theoretical contributions with respect to symmetry. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at those 4 different things within David's process and look at each one of them, what they mean. So in this building, one of them was his office, and the other one beside that to the east was the research associate's office. And then a little bit further to the east was a corner office that was common to graduate students. And David usually had about 2 graduate students amongst the 5 that were in that room. His office was designed to be like a very feel as if the so you meetings with graduate students and with associates, and the most important was the whiteboard that was above those filing cabinets, the low filing cabinets that were side opening. It was a big, it was when whiteboards were relatively new. And so David got one right away, and he used that whiteboard to put all the information that he discussed with people when they were in his room, and he kept it up all week long, and he would go up and he'd the board and he'd think about what the contents of that board said. And he would use it to initiate discussions the week later when he'd have meetings with students and associates after that. Of course, he didn't just meet every week. He would, whenever he had an exciting idea, he would go back to that board and he would talk to people about what was on that board. So time, most important to David, time. Regarding his research time and his particular view of it and his immersion in. Now, he has a particular way of dealing with his research time, which is called flow. Flow was first thought of by a researcher called Mihai, the front cover of his book, Flow. And he investigated a number of scientists and wrote papers on what's entirely based on flow. So it's a time when a researcher's mind is stretched, exerted to accomplish something is voluntary and enjoyed, and it represents something worthwhile and personally valued and very difficult to accomplish. When working, David's mind was invariably, he felt extremely comfortable, represented his natural experience to research. So he didn't have to teach himself to say that he acted. So he was ever cognizant of time as scarce. He was constantly talking about, I'm not going to have enough time. I'm not going to have enough time to do so. It was also consumed by searching for solutions to physical problems. So he saw his contributions regarding symmetry as ways to decrease the time taken to arrive at profitable results in nuclear physics and providing the ability to take the lead in finding solutions. So as I said, if he had this great concern that time, you have to reduce the time that people use to take to solve problems, and that there just isn't enough time and got to keep working. That's why he worked so hard. He was always concerned that there wasn't enough time. So he had a particular you could say was mindedness. Number one, embrace a lack regarding from whom what. Number two, treat participants in a discussion as equals when engaged in conversation, and evaluate their participation by whether they can. You know, David didn't care if you came with all sorts of strange ideas. If you said something interesting, he would listen, and he would not bother you about the things that were odd about what you were saying. He would look for that really interesting thing you were saying from different levels of experience and representatives of various fields, always looking in all different directions. One of the things that he said so frequently was 50% of the people in the world are women. 50% of the people in physics should be women. So this picture of showing back and forth between minds, that was the way that David thought, give me what's exciting, tell me what's going on in there. Now, as you can see, this is C1, there's a C, right? These are the people that is ideas of open mind. This is a picture of Cambridge, of where he was in Cambridge. So we don't have a picture of Howard. In fact, we don't even remember what Howard's last name was, but Howard was the person that David roomed with. And he used to take long walks with Howard, and Howard was the one who taught him to think deeply and bravely about problems in physics. Because before that, he had lots of excitement about it, but Howard kept saying, you got to go deeper, David. You got to go deeper in what you're doing. So next and Cambridge, he went to Oxford to do his graduate. Sir Dennis Wilkinson said to him, you know what? You really should be a theoretician. You really should move away from experimental physics, because that was where David started. He'd always been a hands-on person. And this idea of being a theoretician was new to him. And he thought, wow, that's great. And somebody as important as Sir Dennis Wilkinson thinks theoretician. What? So he got him to move in that direction. And then in '62, when he graduated, Age Bohr, University of Copenhagen, invited him to come there to start his theoretical work. And so this was really exciting for David, because even though he had moved being a theoretician, he never expected he was going to get to go to Copenhagen and work with Bohr there. Now, the reason was David was of the visual imagery that Einstein used. David was so impressed by that visual imagery. And so that was the way that he tackled problems all the time. He always thought about, well, how would he have looked at this? And that's what to David's idea of. Okay, now with regard to November 6th, David never worked harder in his whole life. He was put together a lecture every single day. He had to do this in theoretical physics, where he had, just come from being experimentalist. He was given this work to do, and he just put all of these lectures together. And then when he was finished, he thought, you know what, I think I can get a book out of this. And the book is almost verbatim those lecture notes that he did in that month-long period. So it was an amazing thing. I mean, I'm sure that all of you know this book, the first book that he did. He outlined the research program he was going to undertake, complete until his death. This is what I'm going to be doing. And his goal was to develop a microscopic theory of nuclear collective phenomena, understanding nuclear collective dynamics in terms of neutrons and protons. The results are breakthroughs in his career-long research program, results with each publication giving graduate students and his colleagues improved theoretical foundations for their own self, which is always David's aim. Will be more self-directed in what I do. If he can't do that, then he doesn't go forward with publishing. It has to be that you get something out of it where people can self-direct their learning. Just published this great paper about the results of David Rowe. So a lot of this stuff is taken from what Jerry Dreyer published. So David played a pivotal role in advancing an understanding of nuclear structure and a bridge between the gulf of low energy and high energy nuclear physics. The as a mentor for his graduate students, a campaign to stage them. And Jerry Dreyer's research group is keeping David Rowe's research spirit alive. You just heard Dreyer's research group. And he's published that group has published a great deal of substantial work based on his theoretical contribution. He unfortunately died last year, or else he definitely would have been here. But he was his most illustrious graduate, played similar values regarding self-directed did. And he carried on Rowe's mentoring style in his own Tulane physics graduate students. So that's very exciting that he took that George worked with David and took that idea that self-direction for our graduates is a process. It's not just an aim, it's a way to get to physics. Okay, self-directed learning, as we mentioned, is the optimal approach to academic research. It's the most productive and it produces the most influential work. But here's the problem. It's not easily undertaken by graduate students. So regarding self-physics graduate education, David encouraged flow and took measures to support and enhance it. Remember, flow is that type of self-direction that's not. So he provided the support for self-direction through his space for meeting, this flexibility with his time, his open-mindedness, and a number of innovations regarding symmetry. Yet maintaining research flow and self-directed learning requires support. You can't just all day long thinking about problems if you don't have support. And not all physics graduate students get into flow in the way that David could get into it. David was so lucky. His career. Without the help of John Wood and his wife, Una Rowe, David's life would not have been possible. They was thinking about flow, his research problems. He wasn't the other John and you, so that David could be the person. So in conclusion, the challenge of encouraging self-directed learning in graduate education is something in all the STEM subjects. So he was a pioneer with theoretical nuclear physics regarding symmetry, a proponent of self-directed learning, and in recognizing the necessary value of flow to self-directed learning. He devised a method of encouraging flow and self-directed learning that focused on space, time, open-mindedness, and theoretical contributions. The results have produced a heritage of self-directed learning for graduate students and associates. And his contributions continue to encourage physics graduate students to take up self-direction, and researchers in other STEM subjects to incorporate similar methods in their careers. So if you're interested in more details in this is just a tiny synopsis. I have got a preprint of this paper and it's been submitted to a journal, and you can go into more of the details of what actually happened here. And if you're interested, there's a few pages here of references, but oh, you couldn't read reference 20, like Thank you. Any questions? Yes, Stan. Oh, I can't hear you. Thank you. You know what? If I had known about your group and what you're doing, you would have been in this too. And you can send me. I can, when the paper comes back from the reviewers, I can add it what your group is doing as well. Great.
Let me add a comment. Thank you for.
Exactly.
Oops.
Yeah. That exactly. You got him exactly. Mhm. Yes. No. Yeah. Yes. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes, I can talk a little bit more. I mean, as I mentioned, almost all people in graduate education think self-directed learning should be an aim. I mean, we want people to be able to look after their own research programs, but many people as supervisors think the student, they have to put the scaffolding there for the student in order to get to self-directed learning. And for some, this works. As I said, it's hard to do this type of stuff that David was. He really wanted to support, which was the reason why he brought me on to begin with. He wanted to, so he could support graduate students to understand that take the lead themselves, move ahead themselves. And what you said, try to solve the problem yourself to begin with. Then look at the literature, but not too much. Well, exactly. That's exactly what he. Yeah, the thing is that it's actually, if you want to know more about the process, I mean, a lot of I actually helped start a school, focus on getting people to do their high school work using this type of process. So if you wanted to know more about it, I can tell you more things about papers that I've written about it. But yeah, it takes support. As I said, without Una, the person that he was, because taking up the slack in other areas, not focused. Go. Yes.
So I never realized that David had philosophy.
Yes. Yeah.
But I'm very, I think it's great that you mentioned Rowe.
Mm-hmm.
And even if not seen them, Big Time checks them out. Wonderful.
Yes. Yes. That's right. That's right. One of the most viewed TED Talks.
I had a few years ago. I was trying to figure out why do I like the math better than physics? And I realized it's not because I think that I'm doing it I realize I'm not going to have the world. But I just realized I like doing it.
Yes.
What was actually, it's not for me.
Well, it's the way that you do it too. When you say I just wanted to.
Just realize.
Yes. That's right. In that state. Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yes, that's it. You don't know. That's right. It disappears. Yes. Yeah, it's so exciting, isn't it? I mean, it's the best feeling that one could possibly have in doing research, that you just completely disappear from you're just there with what you're doing. It gives you this fantastic thing. And that's what David was single day of his life. You know, he tried to do every single day. And I think because John and Una, he was able to do it. You know, he had a very exciting research life.
Hi, Carol. This from
Thank you, Bear.
Hopefully there's no feedback. So I think I will thank all of you who attended online, being patient and everything else for some of the technical glitches. And thank you, Arthur, for organizing this, for starting all that.
Well, I didn't organize. I would like to thank you for
No, like
stepping up and, organizing the
he's
seminar and sharing it.
he's the heart of this. So I think he deserves the credit. Okay, so thank you all. So we will stop the recording, and thanks again for all coming.
Thank you.